Okay, hello everybody. Welcome in. Start piling in. Put your feet up. Get ready for the show. We'll just be waiting a couple minutes for everybody to have the ability to get in, and then we'll get started. So just a little bit of a lull here. Actually, I'll tell a little story. So I ordered pizza just a couple of nights ago, and the pizza person came and gave me the pizza, and I paid for it and added a tip. And he said, "Do you want to hear a joke?" I said, "Yeah, I love jokes." I said, "Okay." He said, "Crocodiles can grow up to 14 feet, but usually they only grow 4." So I thought it was hilarious. I should have given him a bigger tip actually after that, because like you get pizza and you get a little comedy show too. So double whammy. He was a good pizza man. Okay, yeah, I'd be interested to see where everybody is from too. Looks like most people are probably from the United States, but go ahead and type in the chat where you're from. Also, you can ask questions during the webinar too. There's a Q&A section where you can ask questions. Those will be curated, and we'll answer some of those at the end. Okay, great. We're just a couple minutes past now. I think we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to Zeplin Talks. This specific Zeplin talk is about recent releases. We're going to overview a couple of the things that we put out there into the ecosystem over the past couple months, mainly screen variants, component variants, and layout specs. We'll have some time at the end to overview questions too. Great. So my name is Mike Pitt, and basically my objective at Zeplin is to make sure that everyone using Zeplin can use it to the fullest of their ability. And this is one of the ways that I help people is by doing webinars like this, where we're overviewing some of the newest features. All right. I think let's just dive in here. So first, we're going to talk about screen variants. So screen variants is pretty interesting, actually. In design tools today, the way that we as designers create screen states, or what we call screen variants, is by creating separate screens. So here you can see I have a default page for my guides screen. I have a loading, and I have an error state too. Down here, I have some breakpoints for desktop, tablet, and mobile. And I also have a light and a dark mode. So this is what would be called screen states or screen variants. The interesting thing is that in development, these disparate or separate screens are actually one in development. So although we create 3 in design, it's actually 1 in development. So my job as a designer becomes, well, how do I communicate to my devs what is the same screen? How do I tell them, hey, these screens are actually the same screen? Well, there's a couple ways that we do it in design tools today. The first might be something like a layout scheme. So here, maybe I've laid out the happy path vertically, and then horizontally, I have something like my error states, right? And I tell my team, hey, when you see this horizontal layout, that means it's a screen variant. Another way might be through text layers. So here you can see I have my guides variants, I have my filter variants, and I have my search variants. And then, just kind of old school would be I'm slacking people, or we're having meetings where I'm running them through exactly what are screen variants in my design tool. And you can actually, you can get away with this workflow, especially for small teams. It's not perfect, but these hacks to communicate screen variants will work. Not perfectly, but they can work. I think when the teams get a little bit larger, they'll get a little bit more complex. It becomes a little more difficult. So for example, even for something like the layout that we chose, the horizontal one, not every designer might use the same layout scheme. So I'm using horizontal, but maybe another designer is using vertical. With the text layers, this is a simple application. I have, 10 screens here. If you have 100 screens, I don't want to be adding text layers 100 different times, right? That just saps my time, takes it away from designing, and is kind of burdensome. In Slacks and meetings, I like slacking people. I like meeting with people. But if there's a more effective way to communicate screen variants, that's what I want to be doing. And you can do that in Zeplin. So let me show you how. You just select your screens, and then you can publish them. Oh, oops, looks like I selected an extra layer there. And then you can publish them to Zeplin through a plugin. And I've actually already published these in Zeplin, so I'll just go ahead and switch over. Here's Zeplin in our dashboard view, where we can see all of our screens. And here's those 3 screens that we were just talking about, the error and the loading state. So to create a screen variant in Zeplin, all I have to do is select the screens and drag and drop them into another screen. And I'll get this nice notification that I set it as a variant. Boom, there we go. So this icon right here is notifying me that this is a screen variant. And if I hop in, now I can quickly toggle between the different screen variants. So here's my default, here's my loading, and here's my error state. And I can do the same for my breakpoints that we talked about. I can do it for light and dark mode, or for like those filter states that we talked about. But the point here is that instantly I know as a dev or someone else on the team what is a screen variant, right? There's no guesswork, and I don't have to rely on some layout scheme like horizontal. I don't have to rely on text layers, and I don't have to rely on Slacks or meetings. I just know what is a screen variant. So it takes the guesswork out of what is a screen variant and speeds up my workflow as a developer and a designer. As a designer, I don't have to worry about communicating what is a screen variant, and as a dev, boom, I just know instantly. So that's a little bit about screen variants. It's a way to structure the different screen states and communicate that to the rest of the team. Let me know if you have any questions about them, and make sure to get them answered. Okay, so next order of business here. Let's talk about component variants. Component variants is kind of similar to screen variants in that we'll have buttons in design, which are actually the same button, but they have multiple states, much like the screens. So here you can see my default, my pressed, my disabled, then my primary, secondary, and tertiary buttons. From Figma, so Figma gives you a way to actually create variants for your buttons. Sketch doesn't currently have a robust capability for creating component variants, and Adobe XD does, but the way that you'll create component variants in Zeplin is the same for XD and Sketch. It's actually different for Figma, and I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But after you publish your components or your symbols into Zeplin, the same way I showed you how to publish screens, what you can do is you can actually create variants from these buttons. So I mentioned that Sketch doesn't allow you to create symbol variants or symbol states. So you can actually create that in Zeplin and add that extra layer of organization to your buttons. The way we do that is just by setting this as a variant section. And Zeplin actually analyzes the naming convention of your buttons. So if you notice, I was using a / naming convention for these buttons, and it'll automatically create component variants based on that. So now I can see that I have these types of primary, secondary, tertiary, and warning, and I have states of default, pressed, and disabled. And I can actually toggle on them too. So here are all my primary buttons, my default, pressed, and disabled, and then obviously secondary, tertiary, warning. So particularly if I'm coming from Sketch or Adobe XD, I can organize all these buttons in my style guide, which is where we are here, easily and automatically through creating a variant. And I might not have all these jumbled buttons, kind of disparate buttons in my design tool anymore. They're just neatly organized and the whole team knows actually what is this same button. Cool. I mentioned there's a different process for Figma. Actually, if you have a variant defined, you can just publish that variant and we'll automatically create that variant group right here. So organization is a big piece of what I can accomplish with variants in Zeplin. The other thing is in design tools, these component states or component variants, they aren't surfaced very easily, right? So here I'm on a screen and I see this default button, but I don't really know that maybe there's other states of this button that exist, right? And I would have to click around a lot to try to find that information. Well, we wanted to make that a little bit easier in Zeplin. So if you select that button in Zeplin that has component variants, you'll get this icon that notifies you that this is in fact a component variant. And you'll get some more information on the right-hand side about the type and the state. Not only that, but if I click this little icon, it'll pop out this window and I can cycle through the different states of my particular button by pressing V. So I see my disabled, my default, and my pressed. And if I wanted to, I could see the types too that we were talking about earlier. So instantly on my screen that I'm inspecting as a dev, I just see all the different states of the button, right? And it's important because as a dev, I need to understand what properties I need to build for this particular button. And that information is easily presented and quickly presented in this format in Zeplin. And I can even inspect the different states here to create them. One other little just piece here is that if I copy the link to this particular button, so there it's copied, I can actually add that to a note. And once I do that, I add that to a note and I can click on that link, say this was meant to be a disabled button instead of my default, I can click on that link and it pops up that window again. So I can instantly communicate, hey, this is like the state of that button that I'm talking about. So just a little improvement right there. Okay, great. So that's a little bit about component variants. It's in the style guide, you can organize component variants quickly, toggle between the types and the states. In the screen view, you can pop out the different states of this button so you know the dependencies as a developer for my pressed and my disabled. And you don't have to worry about, kind of being disorganized in a design tool or not having access to those different states on a particular screen. The information is just there. So obviously it would speed up my development cycle. Okay, cool. So that's screen variants, that's component variants. Let's talk a little bit about layout specs. So what is layout specs? Well, layout specs in Zeplin is basically communicating auto layout from the different design tools in Zeplin. And once again, when you're looking at design tools, not all of the auto layout information is readily available when you're looking at it in a design tool. So we wanted to change that, and we wanted to provide more of a visual way to understand auto layout. One of the big pieces of auto layout is just this child-parent relationship, which which are called containers or items in web development. So one of the tough pieces is understanding that relationship in my design tool. So here's that screen that we're just looking at in Figma. In Zeplin, we wanted to make that easy to view. So what we did is we actually just add this little parent header to let you understand, hey, this card right here is actually in this parent layer above it. So you can understand then how this particular element is resizing according to its container. Not only that, but I get this nice little animation in the upper right that shows me how the constraints work on this particular layer. So this one has auto width and height. And if I select the parent layer here, I can actually see the specs instantly for auto layout. So something that's difficult in design tools is you have to click multiple times to understand the spacing between these different elements. Well, not anymore. If you just hover over this widget on the right-hand side, you can see the spacing between the auto layout and also to the edges here too. Not only that, but these gray bars are notifying me that this is a vertical layout scheme. If it was horizontal, they'd be stacked horizontally. But it just kind of gives me this information quickly and visually. Hey, here's the distance between these different elements, and also they're laid out vertically. Yeah, finally, we have the code snippets here. So some CSS telling us about the flex properties. And we also support code snippets for Android, and then iOS and Swift is coming too. Okay, cool. So yeah, in design tools today, it's a little bit difficult to understand that child-parent relationship. We make that quick and easy by just adding this header. It's also kind of difficult to understand the specs for auto layout because you have to click around a bunch of times. Here we just show the distance between those auto layout elements really quickly and easily. And then we give you this little animation widget too that can help you understand how the constraints work. Okay, great. So that is layout specs. All right, and I think that is mainly it as far as what I wanted to go through for screen variants, component variants, and layout specs. I think now we can have just a little bit of time to go through some questions that I think have been curated for me. So let's see what we got here. Okay, first question, I'll read it out so everybody knows. Hello, I'm wondering if you have any tips for organizing our screens in Zeplin. We have tons and tons of screens. That makes total sense. When you get large applications, you get lots of screens. And they say, and it would be great to know how to organize them. Okay, yeah, good question. So I actually think one of the ways, if you have lots and lots of screens, I don't know if this was asked before I went through screen variants, but if you have tons and tons of screens, you probably have a lot of states for those screens, right? And screen variants can help you organize those. So once you publish to Zeplin, what you can start to do is add these screens into screen variants like we were talking about, and that'll reduce the amount of screens that are actually visible in this view here, and it'll help organize them. So right, we were talking about the loading and the arrow states earlier. Yeah, there's a couple other ways to organize screens in Zeplin. One is through sections. So here you see I have this profile section, I have a guide section. You could also do this based on whatever fit your particular application. Maybe this is features, or maybe this is the teams that are working on these different pieces of your application. That's how you can do sections. So creating sections will also help structure and organize your screens. Another way that you can do it is by adding tags. So here I created my tags for InDesign, in development, and in QA, but you can create whatever tag you would like. And this is just to describe where in the product development lifecycle these particular screens are. And so if I click on that tag, it'll filter based on those screens. So if you're dealing with lots and lots of screens, tags can help kind of reduce that clutter. Yeah, and then the last piece I would say is adding some of our integrations. So here on the right-hand side, we have integrations. We have Slack, we have Microsoft Teams, we have Trello, and we have Jira. So you can actually connect a project itself, a section that we talked about, or a screen to a Jira issue. And then if you come into Zeplin, maybe you're a PM or a dev or even a designer, you can filter based on the issue that you've been assigned. So, hey, I know I'm working on TA27. Well, boom, there's a screen I'm working on right there. So that's a couple of ways that you can organize screens in Zeplin. I just want to touch on a little bit more organization too that we provide. It's one of the big pieces of Zeplin is providing structure to kind of all the data that design tools give. It's kind of like Zeplin is a little bit of a translator for design tools for the rest of the team, right? One of the big ways that we see teams organizing in Zeplin is through project sections. So here you can see I have a project section, and this might just be my entire application. So this is my travel app. And then here I've organized my projects based on the platform. But usually what we see actually is people creating projects based on a particular feature. So maybe it's a search feature and you create a project for that, and then you group them all under travel. So that's a way that you can provide more structure to your screens. You can break them up into different projects. The last thing I'm going to say here, I promise, is that you can actually add links for different resources to this section. So here's how I can add links. I name it, add a URL. But what's cool about this is there's all these kind of disparate data sources for product development, right? We have our design tools, we have our workflow tools, we have our development resources. Like, how do we bring all those together, right? Well, what you can do is add links to this particular application like we have here. So here I have the links to all of my issues in Jira. I have my brief in Notion, which goes over the design brief while we're building this particular app. I have my high fidelity mockups in Figma, and then I have my development component library in Storybook here. So if you want to bring all those resources into one place and kind of have an area where your team can access all these different resources, then go ahead and add these links to a project section. That's one of the big ways that we see teams continuing to be organized and continuing to surface these resources to the rest of their team. Okay, let's see what the next question is here. Okay, I'm a little confused about style guides and how to use them. My team has a library of components in Figma, but how does exporting them into Zeplin work? Okay, so yeah, I actually didn't show the exporting process for components, so I can show that really quickly. Actually, this is what we'll do. I mentioned that in Figma, if you export a variant, then we'll automatically set that variant group in Zeplin. So let me show you that in action. I just unset it right here. And once we export this group into our project, then we'll see that automatically it comes in. There is just one piece I want to talk about right here, these three dots, and this is particular to Figma, but a lot of people don't know this, so it's kind of like a pro tip. If you click this, this is our publish settings, and there's a couple different things that you can change here that might improve your workflow. Exporting components into style guides. Instead of exporting them to style guides, if you uncheck this, you'll export them into the actual project. So sometimes developers like to have a full canvas to inspect a particular component. That's why we allow for that setting. If you're organizing your components based on your page name, you can actually include that name in the component name when you publish to Zeplin. This one's fairly straightforward. This is the one that gets a lot of interest from teams I talk to, is updating the screens by either the name or the corresponding frame. So corresponding frame is actually a unique ID that is associated with each frame in Figma. So even if you change the name of that particular frame, once you publish, it'll still update based on the ID as opposed to the name. And you can do the same thing with components. Last little piece here is just component frame and component order. So we can automatically organize your frames and your components when you export them into Zeplin based on position or name. Okay, but let's do what we were trying to do. Let's export these and see automatically what happens. Boom, done. So here we go. Like I said, you get that that automatic organization from Figma for my variants. Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit when we were inspecting the screen. Like, what is the purpose of moving components into Zeplin? A big piece is just visibility. Like in design tools, these components might be in a separate library. They might be somewhere else from the screen, difficult to find for devs, for other people on the team. With Zeplin, we give you this blue header that will notify your team members, hey, this is a component. So they know not to, like rebuild that particular asset. They probably already have it built if it's a component and it's a part of, say, your design system. So this notifies me as a dev, like, oh, I don't have to rebuild this. I probably have somewhere, I probably have this button somewhere in my repo, right? And then I can also click this and go to that particular button in the style guide and see all the resources associated with it. Yeah, just quickly, the one thing I'll say about the style guide is it's kind of like a repository for your color values, your text styles. You can even add spacing tokens in here and your components too. And what's cool is it's applied directly to the screens that you're working on, right? So you don't have to worry about these resources getting lost anywhere. Okay, all right. Last question here. What is Zeplin working on in 2021 and beyond? Okay, this is, I think I was given this question because it's a tricky one. Without giving too much away, Zeplin kind of sees ourselves as providing more structure to design tools and being a friendlier place for other people who aren't necessarily familiar with design tools to work. So developers, marketing, PM. And I think we're going to continue investing in that area and working to structure all this kind of data that you can get from the different design tools. I will say that we have a big announcement coming up at the end of summer, probably around beginning of fall. So stay tuned for that. That'll be the big release. I can't exactly say what it is, but just stay tuned, and I think you'll be very excited and very happy. Okay, we just have a couple minutes left here. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. Like I said, my name is Mike Pitt. If you have any trouble with any of these features or have any more questions, feel free to reach out to support@zeplin.io. We have real people behind the keyboard that are very, very in-depth in our product and are happy to help you in any way that they can. So definitely reach out to them. And then for screen variants in particular, if you want a little bit of Zeplin swag, we have this promotion where if you tag us on Twitter and or on Instagram, and you send a picture of a screen variant, we'll DM you and we'll get your information and we'll send you some sweet Zeplin swag. So yeah, just send us a picture of you creating, maybe it could be like a GIF of you creating screen variants. Tweet at us or send it to our Instagram account and we'll send you some cool stuff. Okay, great. Well, yeah, once again, good chat with everybody here, and hope to see you soon. Hope to talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.